So welcome to week 3 of the Taste of Freedom. So I'm just going to take the first section of the evening where I will be just having a quick recap of what we did last week, what we explored last week. And I'm going to lead us in a meditation. And then I'm going to hand this over to Jyotika, who's going to do the main input for this evening, talking about the spiral path. So really, I guess we'll just start off with the meditation. So just, start getting into meditation posture and we'll get straight into it, really. And we're going to be doing the mindfulness of breathing. So just setting yourself up. So we're going to meditate a little bit longer this week, so about 5 minutes longer. So we'll have a decent 20 minutes of meditation. So you want to really be sure that you do have a good posture, because we're going to be doing it a little bit longer. So just remembering the principles of good posture, being upright, supported. You want to feel your base supported. So whether you're sitting on a chair or meditation cushions, making sure you have a solid foundation supported by the chair or the floor. An upright alertness, your spine long, your skull just sitting at the top of your spine, shoulders back and relaxed, your chest open. But you also want to be relaxed. So balancing the alertness, the uprightness with relaxation, letting go into the supports of the posture. So we notice, first of all, our immediate environment, the space we're in, the shape of the room, the objects in the room, sounds, the temperature, our own position in relation to everything else, where we are located in the room. Bringing attention to the sensations of the body. Feeling the contact between the body and our supports. Sensations of our clothes, areas of tightness, different temperatures, the air on the skin. Notice any sensations of discomfort or tightness, any unpleasant sensations. And just bringing a kindly awareness to those sensations without trying to push them away. Notice also any pleasant sensations, bringing a curious, receptive awareness to those without grasping after those. Notice also areas of our body that have neither pleasant nor unpleasant sensation. Again, bringing a curious, receptive, and kindly awareness to those areas. Tune in with our emotional state. What is our emotional weather? And our thoughts? Are we lost in our thoughts? And if we are, that's okay. Just noticing we are lost. And try to hold our thoughts in awareness and let them pass. We begin now the mindfulness of breathing. In the first stage, placing a count before the in-breath. 1, breathe in, breathe out. 2, breathe in, breathe out. And so on until 10, and then starting again. So moving into the next stage, we're just going to let go of the count. I should say we are doing a 3-stage metta bhavana today. Mindfulness of breathing. So just letting go of the count. Noticing the sensations of the breath in the body. Just noticing if we are lost in our thoughts. If so, just coming back to the sensations of the breath in the body. Moving into the final stage, we focus our awareness to the point at which we first feel the breath entering the body. So not assuming we know where this is, but rather curiously investigating the sensations to find the point where we first feel it entering. And maintaining of focused attention on that point. And just checking if we have been able to maintain that attention. And if not to worry. We just come back to the point at which we first feel the breath entering the body. Trying to balance the focused attention with the receptivity of awareness. And just for the last few moments, letting go of any effort and just sitting, letting the mind do whatever it wants. So when you're ready, bringing the meditation to an end, slowly bringing back some movement and opening your eyes. Good. So I'm just going to do a recap on what we did last week. And then we'll go into our breakout groups and discuss our home practice, and I'll remind us of that. But so last week we looked at Vimutti a bit more in a kind of a different way than usual. So we explored how Vimutti is, or freedom, is not an idea or a concept, and that it's a direct experience. So there is often a incongruence between what our idea of freedom can be and what our direct experience of freedom is. I talked about the Tantra and the Vajrayana, which are kind of somewhat synonymous, and how this movement of Buddhism is particularly concerned with the direct experience of the Dharma, of the Buddha's teaching. And that tradition gave rise to quite a lot of symbols. And then I explained a bit about the difference between a symbol versus a sign. So I highlighted how a sign can just communicate information, and it can often be communicated through other means of communication. A symbol, on the other hand, communicates something that cannot be communicated through any other means than that of the symbol itself. You can describe its attributes, but no other form of communication can get at what the symbol is trying to say to us. So myself and Jyotika talked during the week a bit about this, we were reminded at how subtle this is. I was reflecting on that again, and actually I think a more simple, if poetic way of putting it is that symbols speak directly to the heart. I think that's a good way to talk about it. They don't go through the sort of rational mind. A symbol will communicate directly to the heart. And then I introduced the Dakini. So the Vajrayana symbol of freedom is represented through the Dakini, and I described some of her attributes, and I showed you guys an image of the Dakini, and I sent a link to that image in the follow-up email for you guys to look at. We did a meditation on her as well. So we explored her through ideas, through describing her attributes, through the symbol, through the image itself, and through meditation, so that we could more deeply digest the image of the Dakini. And last week's homework was to read the book, the booklet, up to page 32, and do a daily meditation practice of the mindfulness of breathing, and in particular to take some time to look at the image of the Dakini and notice what your response is to her, what the symbol of the Dakini communicated to you, and to write down some of your responses and to share it with the group if you felt you were up for that. So that was last week. Now we can go into our breakout groups where we can share what our weeks have been like in terms of exploring this material. So Louise, whenever you're ready, you can set the groups going. And just to highlight, last week that I understood there were some problems if some people couldn't self-assign. So if that's happening again, Louise will assign you, but hopefully it will work out. Okay, see you in a bit.
Okay, so I have the unenviable task this week about talking about concepts, whereas Prasanna Deva, he was allowed to talk about symbols and dakinis, all very exciting, but I have to go dry and talk about concepts this week. but I will try to jazz it up as best I can. So, yeah, we're going to talk about conditionality. I'm going to talk about a thing called conditionality, which is really central to the Buddhist teaching. And then from that, two modes of conditionality. One mode is called the spiral and the other is called the cyclic. So for those of you who don't know, the Buddha had this experience that was called nirvana, enlightenment, liberation, back about 500 years before the birth of Christ. And he had it under the Bodhi tree in northeastern India. He never really said too much about his actual experience of enlightenment. He said it was just you couldn't put it into words. It was beyond concepts. He did make some attempts, but really what he was interested in, I think I mentioned this in the first week, was trying to communicate to the rest of us how we can go about having the experience he had. Okay. But he did use some symbols and he used some concepts to try to give a flavor of what it was. And then the whole Buddhist tradition just continued on, and you had periods of great flourishing, and like the Indo-Tibetan tradition with all their various deities, the Zen tradition, the Southeast Asian Theravadan traditions, monastic traditions, etc. Yes, so even the symbols that he used and the concepts, they're primarily used as ways to help us to move from our experience of not feeling free ultimately to feeling free ultimately. So in a way, everything that he used, even to talk about his experience, is metaphor. It's metaphor. It's metaphorical. And this is one of the things I love about the Buddhist tradition, that when you start going literal and literalistic, you're really missing the point. Everything, all the teachings that you get, they're all just metaphor. Okay. Anyway, his most concise conceptualization of what reality in essence consists of is something that's called Praticca-Samuppada, which is very, very famous. Some of you might know about it already. And this is translated as conditioned co-production or conditionality. It's a very famous formula that he gave soon after he gained enlightenment, which is this being that becomes from the arising of this that arises. This not being that does not become from the ceasing of this that ceases. Okay? You get that, you get enlightened. All right, so your homework for this week is to get that, think about that. Right? My son, who's 12, he's really, really into physics, and he's pretty precocious, reads these kind of books and biography, read a biography there on Einstein. And anyway, I told him about this conditioned co-production, this being that becomes from the arising of this that arises, this not being that does not become from the ceasing of this that ceases. He's like, what's that mean? Okay. So it's the Buddha using concepts, but in such a way that you can't nail it down. He's trying to get at something. Okay, trying to get at something that's really beyond concepts. But one of the things he's getting at in this formulation is that all things in the universe, be it a grain of sand or a solar system, they're totally subject to change. Nothing in them, nothing in us is fixed or totally separate from everything else. Nothing is self-originating. We are in essence a process dependent on a multitude of other conditions for the experience we have. So there's a word here that's kind of emerged in Buddhist circles called changingness. Changingness. So changingness is at the essence of the universe and is at the essence of human experience. This according to the Buddha in the Buddhist tradition. So all of this is also referred to as conditionality, maybe a little more simply, conditionality. And it has two modes of functioning. It has the cyclic and it has the spiral. And the spiral isn't just a spiral like that. The spiral is moving outwards all the time, ever more. The next kind of spiral it goes to, it expands and it just keeps going like that. Okay. Yeah. Ad infinitum. So the Buddha said that the purpose of human life, the best thing we can do with it, is to devote more and more of our energy and time into the spiral mode of conditionality and extract ourselves more and more from the cyclic. And according to the Buddha, and many great teachers have come after him, we have a choice in this. So we can actually choose one over the other. So what the cyclic is, so this is just to do with cycles, habits, fixed patterns. Just go around again and again and again. The sun comes up, the sun goes down, the moon comes up, the moon goes down. The earth revolves around the sun. In the winter, it's further from the sun and we're colder. In the summer, it's closer, etc. And that just happens year on year. Within human experience, the same thing happens. There are cycles, there are habits where there's no movement and no depth. Now, this in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, in as much as that is just part of life. We have a body. We are part of a planet that has a trajectory around the sun. There's nothing we can do about it. Okay. I'll go on a little bit more in a little bit, just where it becomes a little more problematic. But just to try to describe what the cyclic mode of conditionality is. So you have it in the physical realm, in the realm of physics, biological realms. And then I was thinking today just of sport, particularly just observing sport as opposed to partaking in it or playing it, where things get a little more complex. But I like to watch rugby. And I've been watching rugby for years and years. I remember as a kid, I used to love the Five Nations as it was back then. And so I've been watching it for years and years. But it doesn't really enrich my life. Okay? I can never say, yeah, I've gone really deep with my rugby watching this season. You know, really, it lent a great depth to my experience. It was almost akin to reading Tolstoy. You know, it's just never like that. It's the band it moves through is really quite narrow. Your team is up, your team is down. And that's about it, you know. You know, it doesn't get any better or worse than that. There are individual dramas, but it's got a very narrow kind of a band. So just observing sport, and it has its own pleasures, you know. So that's kind of why I like it, and I like the game. I just, you know, but it doesn't have a particular depth to it. So that would be an aspect of cyclic mode of conditionality within the human experience. It can be pleasurable, it can be interesting, and it can be painful, but you're not going to get particular depth. And I remember going to see in the cinema a few years ago with a friend of mine, Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. And I've never seen it. I'm a big movie fan, but I've never seen it. And it was on in the lighthouse and we went. I remember just coming out and just being, I remember the first 5 minutes going, oh, okay, well, this is going to be really amazing. And just coming out, just blasted, you know, into outer space with that film. Never had an experience like that with rugby or with watching sport. Anyway, that'll just give you some sense. So then what's the spiral like? So the spiral mode of conditionality. Well, that is expansive, it's connecting, it's generative, it's insightful, it has a feeling of richness, a feeling of depth. And from that, you can get a sense of inner strength, inner peace, much greater energy, much greater sense of wanting to contribute positively to the world, to your community. So these are features of the spiral mode of conditionality. Yeah, there's loads of examples. Art, engaging in art can be a really good example of that for me anyway. I used to go to loads of theatre when I was younger. I studied theatre, studied it in university, and I used to act. And I remember there's a very famous production, people who have involved with the Vinny involvement in Irish theatre might know of it, and it was Donald McCann in Brian Friel's play The Faith Healer on in the Abbey. And it was on in the late 80s. And he played the part of Frank Hardy, the main character. And I was 15, and I was the most profound night of theatre I've ever had in my life, completely transfixed. I remember his Donald McCann's hands were the last thing, the spotlight on his hands, and then it slowly faded. And I was completely transported. It was just absolutely incredible experience, and it's really stayed with me. So experience, an artistic experience, either something you create or something you see, can have that experience. Loads of things can have a very expansive experience, a very expansive effect. And when that happens, we're on what the Buddha would have termed, we're aligning ourselves with spiral conditionality. Okay, but I want to look at this from another angle, and it's the angle of the mind. Okay, and the mind is so central and to the Buddhist teaching. So first off, and you probably know this kind of stuff, but first off, so the mind in Buddhism isn't the brain. Okay, it's not the brain. Right? What the mind includes, what it is in Buddhism, is yes, there's a rationalizing aspect, but also it's the emotional aspect and the volitional aspect, that which drives us. Okay? So when you hear in Buddhism talk of mind or chitta, it's not the brain. It's not just the ability to conceptualize. It's not IQ. Right? It's thinking and emotion and our drives, our volition. Okay? That's the mind. So in meditation and in the Buddhist tradition in general, what we're doing is training the mind. That's what it's interested in. And the Buddha wanted us to train the mind so that we could go from this experience of incarceration to the experience he had, which was of liberation, of freedom. And why we're working with the mind, directly on the mind, especially in something like meditation, is because it's the source of all of our desires, our good desires and our not so good desires. And it's a source, it's within the mind that our freedom emerges and comes. It's from within the mind. Okay. So we're looking to transform the mind. That's what Buddhism is trying to do, transform the mind. And things like mindfulness meditation, ethics, the metabhavana, lots of different things are agents of this transformation, exercises, practices of this transformation. Body-centered activities also really, really important. Okay, anything where we're doing physical as something physical, and we're able to be with the sensations, physical sensations, in doing whatever we're doing, whatever that might be. Our tax returns. Yeah. Okay, so like everything in the universe, the mind is moving, it's changing. Okay, it's not exempt from this law of conditioned co-production, changingness. The mind is in that process too. But the mind will pull us in different directions, and that's why we meditate. So often when we start to meditate, we feel we're not very good at it because we can't concentrate, right? And that's why we meditate. If we could concentrate whenever we wanted to, we wouldn't have to meditate. So it's part of my job as a meditation teacher is just to encourage people not to get discouraged at that stage of their meditation practice because they can't concentrate. And I just try to remind them, well, that's why you're meditating. And it's an art, it's a practice. It's like learning an instrument, like learning a language. It takes time. Okay? Because the mind is pulling us in these different directions. We sit down just to stay absorbed in the breath and our physical experience. And within a couple of minutes, we're off in some fantasy about a holiday that we want, or a memory of an argument that we had a week ago, and the things we wish we could have said and would have said. Okay. So our mind then, it runs along these grooves, like a glacier or a river. It runs along familiar grooves. And the Buddha had a lovely phrase, what the mind tends towards, so the mind becomes. What the mind tends towards, so the mind becomes. So if we keep tending towards resentment, if we keep tending towards wishing for another square of chocolate, and we do that again and again, and it becomes habituated, then that's what we do. We don't have to make any effort. We'll just be quite resentful. We'll just eat more chocolate. And in neuroscience now, they have a phrase, what fires together, wires together, which is exactly the same thing, only they've kind of shown it on the physical level. So what we keep doing, the habits that we have, our synaptic nerves fire in that way. So if we're used to getting up a half hour early to meditate in the morning, then we do it without much effort. So sea swimming is a good example of my life because I've been doing quite a lot of, well, not a lot of it, but more than I have been doing. I might get into a couple of times a week, and I just don't really think of it anymore now, the cold and getting in this discomfort, because I'm getting habituated. My synaptic nerves are kind of fused together. Yeah. Okay, so this is the body, the mind reacting to stimuli. Okay? So we see chocolate, we want to take it. We see the cold ocean, and we want to get in, or we don't want to get in. Okay, depending on how habituated we have become around this particular stimuli. There's just a reaction. And the mind in this way is determined by what stimulates it. Okay? So it's determined by what stimulates it. And there's a habit there. And some habits are good and some aren't so good. But this tendency of the mind to react is akin to the cyclic mode of conditionality. Okay? A problem with a lot of our behaviors is that we do them unconsciously. And there are behaviors, a lot of them that we don't want to do, and we're not even that conscious that it's not something we want to do. It's only when we really start to meditate and really explore our inner experience that we start sifting through our life in more detail and deciding, well, actually, what are the habits I really want to have in my life, and what do I not want to have? And we then start moving into the spiral mode, And in the spiral mode, the mind becomes more creative. So there's another very famous distinction, which is in terms of the nature of the mind and the two modes of functioning of the mind within the Buddhist tradition. And that's mind that reacts and mind that creates. And it's another way of looking at this idea of the two modes of conditionality, the spiral and the cyclic. So we have a reactive mind and we have a creative mind. Now, within a creative mind, something new emerges from whatever sets it in motion. Okay? So it's not dependent on familiar stimuli. It's active on its own account. It's spontaneous. If somebody pushes your buttons, you don't react. Okay? You see the tax returns, you don't groan terribly so that it's just a complete chore. You just, okay, got to do them. Bit of a pain. There we go. It's not so bad. The creative mind is independent. It's original. It has the taste and experience of freedom. It has its own free flow of energy. It's responsive to others. It can be artistic, but not necessarily. It doesn't have to be artistic. It's generous. It has awareness. There's another little phrase. It loves where there is no reason to love. Okay. Whereas the reactive mind is determined and conditioned by what stimulates it. It's mechanical, predictable. People press and things press your buttons. You just react. It's repetitive. There's no depth. There's a flatness to it. Okay, it can be unaware. Now, it's a little complex because we do need habits, and we do that can be just an aspect of life. You just got to get the train, you got to get the bus, you got to drive, you got to do these things. But so much of what we do, we're doing unconsciously and in ways that are reactive as opposed to creative. And what we're trying to do in the Buddhist tradition and with the Buddhist practice is moving from the reactive mind to the creative. And if we're within the creative, to ever more creative. So that when we're met with the cyclic mode of conditionality, we're responding with creativity. And in that, we're then aligning ourselves with the spiral mode of conditionality. And both of these modes are inherent within the universe and are inherent within the human experience. So how do we make this transition, okay, from the reactive to the creative? Well, meditation, mindfulness practice, metabhavana, bringing awareness to that which presses your buttons, okay, that which really triggers you, and slowing down and starting to figure out, well, what is it? What's my trigger here? And what's my trigger response? Asking questions, talking to people, writing things down, developing a space, developing a gap. It's said that there is actually a gap between the stimuli and how we react, between somebody in work who drives you crazy, somebody in your family who you find very frustrating. There is a gap between you kind of flaring up and giving out, or a gap between them doing what they do that drives you crazy and then you flaring up. There is actually a gap there, and it's figuring out where that is and how you can use that to change your behavior. That's just an example. Yeah. So in meditation in particular, we're always emphasizing coming back to direct physical experience. Okay, what's happening in my body right now? What am I feeling and what am I thinking? Okay, so that's mindfulness. Metta, I'm sure we'll look at metta in the coming weeks. That's another type of meditation, and to do with more to do with the heart and positive emotion and emotional strengthening. Okay. So let me see, time is ticking on a bit. Okay, so just to move on a little bit with this, I'm not going to say much more because that's a fair bit of information for you. Sangharakshita, a man who started the Triratna community, he was an Englishman, and he went to India during the war, World War II, and he stayed on, got ordained into the Theravadan tradition, and then went up to Kalimpong, where a lot of the Tibetans had to come down fleeing the Chinese invasion of Tibet, and he met a lot of the Tibetan lamas and rinpoches. And so he got quite a broad experience of different Buddhist traditions. But he was very, very steeped in Western culture as well, and in art, in particular. So he art and literature. So he really emphasized the role of art and how art can help us shift from the reactive mode into a more creative mode, either through the creation or through the observing or partaking in it. Okay? And he also emphasized the effect nature can have on us in doing this too. Art and nature, how they can help transform and help us to move from the reactive to the creative, to get us, align us with the spiral mode of conditionality. So this week, I'd like you to spend some time in nature without headphones, without your phone. Okay, just leave all that at home or in work, wherever you are. Just go out, pick a time, go somewhere where nature is present, by the sea, in a park, wherever, and just sit for 10 or 15 minutes or walk slowly for 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, and take in your surroundings. That's all you have to do. Just take in your surroundings. And go on your own. Don't go with somebody so you're chatting. Right? You're just taking in your surroundings. Ideally for 15 minutes. Walk slowly if you don't want to sit. And when you're finished, just get a sense afterwards, walking back home or walking back to your office, just get a sense, what effect did this have on your mind? If you can do 20 minutes, I would encourage 20 minutes, because it usually takes 20 minutes for the mind really to start to settle. Okay? But if you can't, if you've only got 10 or 15 minutes, that's fine. Just particularly if you're just going to sit and not do anything else. So that's one thing for this week. We'll also want you to meditate, keep meditating. But the other thing I'd like you to do is take in some art this week, or even create some art if you do that. Okay, so read some poetry or listen to music that moves you. The galleries are back open again. Go and just look at a couple of paintings. Just sit and look at a couple of paintings in a gallery for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. There's an order member in England. He's a poet and he's a writer, and he wrote a book of poems on Cézanne. Cézanne was a big hero of his, but he will go to sometimes the gallery in London, National Gallery or wherever, and he'll just stand and look at a painting for ages. And he was looking at a painting, I can't remember what it was now, if it was Cézanne or not, and he stood for about an hour just looking at this painting. And the attendant obviously was finding him really a bit of a bother. And she came over to him and she said to him, "What are you doing?" And so he ended up getting into a really interesting conversation. He says, "I'm just looking at the painting." She said, "You've been here for about an hour." Okay. But I'm not asking you to sit and look at a painting for an hour. Okay, but if you can sit for 10 or 15 minutes, okay, do that. Or just take a book of poetry if you're into poetry and look at that, or a film that you know is really kind of, it's not popcorn, it's not entertainment, it's actually well, you might have seen it before and it really moved you. You know? And again, afterwards, just come out and just have a sense of what effect did that have on your mind. Okay, so we're going to break up into groups now for 10 minutes, if that's okay, Louise. And I'd like us just to just discuss anything that's emerged, if you have any questions or anything you want to share. And also, ideally, just we could use a bit of the time to think, share about where you might go to be in nature and what you might look at, how you might engage in art.